It's New York. Yeah, it's no secret that Marvel's Big Apple is the only rival to Gotham in the race of being the worst place to live in, ranging from alien invasions to the whole casually tossing your car in a rage because Bruce went through his fourth identity crisis of the week. I would say it's nearly as bad as Gotham. Only one of these cities were considered so bad to the point of being forcibly removed from the United States of America. Well, that's a whole other story. And while yes, I can sit here for the next 20 minutes and tell you how god-awful New York is, that wouldn't make much of a video. And despite what editorial will tell you, New York isn't the only place to live in. So let me act as your real estate agent and tell you where you should avoid to rent and especially buy. Before I get into it, no, I'm not sponsored. Come on, I'm only at, what, 200 odd subs? Thank you, by the way. You won't have to hear a Raid Shadow Legends ad anytime soon, but what I was saying is that I want to talk about an average city, so we have at least something to compare to. Not something obscure like Twin Falls, Idaho, where, if I'm being honest, got blasted off the face of the map. It would take a couple of years before the Avengers would notice and finally do something. But big enough where there's at least some superhero activity and maybe even a team. Let's say Los Angeles. Pretty big city, but not the hotspot that New York is. And hey, they even have a on and off Avengers team, the West Coast Avengers. On and off being the keyword. For being Los Angeles, there aren't many villains to justify keeping a dedicated team. Sure, it's commonplace for there to be collateral damage. That's not exactly the most ideal scenario, but again, compared to New York, where it's randomly blipped into Hell Dimension number 5, I would take having my house destroyed over it any day of the week. To give you an idea of how much easier it is to live in Los Angeles, let me tell you 2 stories that came out during the same time. In the West Coast Avengers, there's an overarching story about how MODOK is creating land sharks to give back at every girl who has rejected him. Surely a motivation of all time, but hey, land sharks do sound pretty scary until this is what they look like, and the most amount of damage they do is destroy small businesses. And yes, viewer, that is where everyone's favorite industry plant, Jeff the Land Shark, came from. Despite crushing the evil petit bourgeois, they don't do a whole lot. I'm gonna be honest, the comic was more focused on Quentin being led on by Gwenpool, which, yeah, he deserves that, and more. And being in the same state as him probably knocked it down a couple pegs, but I digress. Now let's take a look at what's happening around the same time in New York. Absolute carnage. Okay, maybe it's not all that bad, it could just be a cover, you know. Carnage managed to split himself and started rampaging throughout the city, either infecting people or devouring them, including Miles Morales being infected and turned into Carnage offshoots. You know what? Yeah, why not give this guy a symbiote? I'm sure nothing will go wrong. Oh god. Well, what I'm trying to say is that for every Quentin you have to bear witness to in Los Angeles, you'll have to plan your commute home around this guy, and honestly, it's a harder choice than you think. So if you want to see the wonders of superheroes and not face bi-monthly internal damnation, I highly recommend going to Los Angeles. The next place I want to talk about is a little bit more obscure, but I think it's still an interesting place to discuss: Pleasant Hill. You think a name like Pleasant Hill would be safe to live in, but actually, it was a government cover-up done by S.H.I.E.L.D. At this point, S.H.I.E.L.D. had the Cosmic Cube, well, a manifestation of it. It's weird, and let's not get into that, but with this MacGuffin, they were able to rewrite reality to a certain extent. Seeing an influx of villains in captivity, and obviously, they were far away from being rehabilitated, S.H.I.E.L.D. decided the best course of action was to mind-wipe these villains and give them new lives, as a way to change them into mild-mannered civilians in a hyper-surveillance town. This obviously didn't end very well when they learned their true identities. When they did, they immediately held the town hostage and forced even the Avengers to come out to deal with them. I don't think I have to tell you being in a small town filled with villains that can turn on a dime isn't a very good idea. While the average person obviously couldn't get in, that doesn't mean S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't hire civilians for their social experiment. It was a way for the town to feel properly lived in and double as a way for prisoners to be watched over. Now, if it was just adults, it would be fine, I guess, but there were also children in this city. What if it was purple? I saw my son get ice cream from the absorbing man like this, I would not be filled with the most amount of confidence. This situation can go in two ways. Either you're some D-list villain, yeah, you're a threat to the police and you've robbed a couple banks from here and there, but overall not the biggest threat to the world. Well, now that S.H.I.E.L.D. has you, you're gonna have your mind tampered with and forced to live in a whole new life, which raises a lot of ethical questions, and as having your entire life stripped away from you, even if it was a life of crime, is no way to live. The other way is that you're a civilian worker who works at least, let's say, a local restaurant. Yeah, it's a little scary to serve at Craven, but hey, S.H.I.E.L.D. is giving you a pretty nice chunk of change just to serve food, and you even get to keep the tips. But a week later, now Craven the Hunter is currently hunting you down as retaliation for being a part of a giant government psyop. Both of these situations are absolutely awful to go through, and plus you're setting the groundwork for a secret empire, which was not good for anyone involved. Mostly for readers. To leave the United States for a moment, let's talk about an amazing country, the glorious country of Latveria. Now, what I'm about to say will mark me as an enemy of the state, but hear me out. Does Dr. Doom love the people of Latveria? Yes. Does he provide them with an amazing education system, great industry, and even protect them to the best of his abilities? Again, he does. Dr. Doom, for all his faults, is an amazing administrator and was able to turn Latveria on the brink of collapse to a global superpower. For being so small, Latveria has access to some of the best technology due to the technological genius Dr. Doom has. Unlike other places, you don't have to worry about wars and supervillains because no one, and I mean no one, wants to make an enemy of Doom. Victor is just as vengeful as he is a leader. Take Johnny Storm sleeping with his, at the time, fiance. You want to know what the first thing he did after realizing? Doom shot Johnny with a cosmic amplifier, taking away his ability to flame off, but also increasing his temperature to a staggering amount. He couldn't eat, be around others, and even forced to stay in an incubator for weeks. He fell into a deep depression but wasn't even able to convey that because anytime he attempted to let out a single tear, it would immediately evaporate. So in short, you don't want to mess with Doom, no less Latveria. But again, Dr. Doom is vengeful, and for all his protecting he does, sometimes you might get dragged into this bullshit against the Fantastic Four. Again, this man is spiteful and would throw away anyone just to get back at Reed Richards. And hey, the Fantastic Four might even knock on your door beforehand because when Sue wants her daughter, she'll get her daughter. When talking about Latveria, there's one major problem. Doom at the end of the day is a dictator. A benevolent one, but a dictator nonetheless. Oddly enough, he's almost like a mother figure. Now stay with me, but he'll provide for you, make sure you're taken care of, and at the worst, keep you safe. But the moment you give them the slightest amount of pushback, will lead you to face their wrath. Instead of the back end of a sandal, Doom shows at least a little mercy and just merely makes an example out of you by foot diving you in the middle of Doomstack. If that wasn't bad enough, Victor essentially has his own secret police with the Doombots. If they're able to give the heroes a tough time, they can definitely make quick work of you. Though in his defense, this is only if you commit the horrendous crime of critical thinking. Doom is adored by his people and he loves them just as much. Doom again is an amazing leader and does provide for his people as long as you don't mind living in Marvel's North Korea. Before heading back to America, let's talk about something different. Instead, let's look at some place that was once considered a utopia. A place where scarcity doesn't need to exist. Paradise for the land sharks because money doesn't exist. Only goodwill and favors. A place where you can be free without fear or prejudice. Well, as long as you were a mutant. That's right, we're talking about Marvel's favorite ethno-state, Krakoa. But if this place is supposed to be a paradise, where did it go all wrong? Firstly, this part is going to assume you're a mutant. While that does sound cool on paper, it's really less than stellar. You think you might get some really cool powers like metal manipulation or pyrokinesis, but most mutants aren't exactly like that. With how X-Men is written, I know it's hard to see that way as they only focus on the awesome powers. But most mutants aren't exactly suited for combat. Most mutations are either so minor you wouldn't notice, or straight up detrimental. For every Omega level mutant like Jean Grey, you have 100 guys like Beak. For all you know, you're still the same old guy, but now you're blue. Not in the cool way Nightcrawler is blue, but hey, if being a mutant doesn't work out, I know a group that will take you in with open arms. With that being said, when you're a mutant, no matter how strong or weak you are, you have to deal with mutant problems now. I don't know what Marvel's equivalent of InfoWars is, But whatever stories they're running is doing an amazing job of painting mutants in the worst light possible.
Turn the friggin' I seems gay.
People will just straight up hate you for no real discernible reason. We know this is true because of what has been going on with Kamala Khan, or known as Miss Marvel. I bring up Kamala because comparing her first time revealing her identity as an Inhuman to her parents was night and day compared to her telling them she was a mutant. During Magnificent Miss Marvel's father learns the truth of Kamala's secret identity. And being a conservative Muslim father is not the happiest to learn that his daughter is sneaking out and putting herself in danger. Well, yes, he disapproves of her superhero activities. Throughout the story, realizes that Kamala at the end of the day is brave for putting her life on the line every day to save others. Now, do you notice something? They never focus in on her Inhuman identity, something that's vital to her character and is actively a part of her origin. Now, this plotline wasn't able to be fully fleshed out after the story arc because their memories were wiped because, comics. While in New York X, the first major book where Kamala is now an Inhuman mutant hybrid, because, this book tackles her coming to terms and accepting her new mutant identity, but when her cousin finds out, he literally goes out of his way to start attacking her, telling her that she can't tell anyone in her family because her being a mutant, and I quote, will break their hearts, which is just, oh my god. At first, while reading this issue, I thought maybe they'll come around by the end or at least leave the door open. Well, during dinner, Kamala talks about how Miss Marvel, again, her dad doesn't know at this point, that Miss Marvel is taking a break from all this mental strain of being a mutant, and all that her father can muster is, I bet her father must be really happy. Jesus Christ, man, I get it, there's an oppression metaphor for mutants, but it gets to a point. While this may be a signifier in how modern Marvel handles mutants, it is. It also shows that people will just hate you for being a mutant. So making friends outside of Krakoa is gonna be pretty hard, especially when most mutant problems are self-inflicted. Like, no matter how good of a person you can be, Magneto spouting homo superior like your uncle at Thanksgiving, and the X-Men telling everyone, no, we can definitely keep the cosmic being at bay, trust us, doesn't do much for the PR department. But this video is entitled Sentinel Propaganda. It's about places, so let's get back to Krakoa. Being a mutant sucks. Maybe it's not too bad. Well, being a nation ran by some of the most powerful mutants, it sure as shit isn't that well guarded. And I'm not just talking about threats from outside the island. There's plenty. You have Nimrod, other countries, but you also have to worry about your fellow mutant within Krakoa. One that comes to mind is everyone's favorite queer-baiting man of science, Hank McCoy. Maybe we can start with how he immediately wanted to create the CIA for Krakoa, which is not the best of ideas. But hey, what could go wrong? Shortly after making said CIA, Beast would orchestrate a full-on genocide on a fictional country in South America by reverse engineering a bioweapon where plants would merge and consume any organic creature within the entire country. It just doesn't exist anymore. Everyone died because of Beast. When confronted about it, all he could chalk it up to was a simple miscommunication, in which, in his defense, I guess that's certainly true, Beast would go on to make multiple clones of Wolverine as a way to make his perfect strike force. Oh, and when Beast released a giant hulking kaiju across Krakoa, and this is just one of many instances of Krakoa being breached. I mean, God have mercy on your soul if Captain America comes knocking on your door, and you're in an X-Men book, because American History X will gain a whole new meaning to you. But it's not all that bad, at least you have the resurrection protocols to bring you back if something happens. In Krakoa, death means nothing, as long as the Quiet Council decides it. Yeah, no, your resurrection is put up to vote, and if Eric Buddy here wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, oops, you're not coming back. Not to mention there's a waiting list. Imagine having your wife dead for weeks and you have to wait there because some asshole like Quentin can't manage to not be 6 feet under all the time. Oh, and speaking of the Quiet Council, who are they exactly? These are some of the most dysfunctional governments ever to be conceived. Sure, there are some good guys like Jean, plus Magneto was well into his redemption arc by this point, so it's not all that bad, but guess who else is on that? Apocalypse and Mr. Sinister? You know, the guy who opened up a portal to hell and now obliterates teens in the Crucible every Saturday because why not have state-sanctioned gladiators? And it's not like he got any better, no, he still very much believes in might makes right. It's just now he's like your senator. And then Mr. Sinister, who's probably one of the most irredeemable characters in all of Marvel, for him conducting human experiments both in World War II and Vietnam are some of his less egregious actions, let's say. He's not even truly a mutant and doesn't even have full citizenship, but because he has the genetic data of every mutant, secured him a seat and now is your local governor, despite him committing some of the worst atrocities against mutant kind. Not even the good members of the Quiet Council are all that clean either. I mean, look at Marvel's second worst Catholic, Kurt, where, because mutants were on the decline, his first initiative, and I quote, make more mutants. Now, if you're even slightly familiar with X-Men, you know while not all mutants are bad parents per se, they're all pretty neglectful. I mean, I guess it's a hidden ability that comes with being one. With that being said, after a while, Kurt is confronted with the horrid realization. They certainly did succeed with making more mutants. But none of the parents want to look after their children, so now Krakoa has almost the opposite problem, and tons of babies without parents are riddled across the country, starting the next generation of mutants to a fantastic start. Oh, and I forgot to mention this, you have no say in who's on the Quiet Council as intended. But do you want to know what's the worst part of all of this? Krakoa doesn't even exist anymore. At least Marvel's version of North Korea was able to say, hey, I didn't collapse under Doom's regime. They couldn't even figure that out. So now you're stuck in an X-Men relaunch, and that's probably even worse than being in New York. All those babies Nightcrawler created, well, caused, we never see them again after Krakoa, so one can assume that they didn't make it out. Alrighty, finally, the big one. The one place that I've been hyping up for this entire video. Marvel's in New York. Why is this place so bad? Well, I lightly touched on it, but the main creative heads at Marvel when it was first getting started all lived in New York. So naturally, they worked with what they were familiar with. And after the first batch of heroes were released, it only made sense to put new heroes relatively close to well-established ones. But then pretty much every hero you know that's on Earth, you can safely say lives in New York. Therefore, everything happens in New York, which is the problem. Spider-Man Queens, Stark building Manhattan, Doctor Strange Greenwich whenever he's not in hell. The list goes on, and we even have a ballpark of how many superheroes reside in New York. In Age of Ultron, Peter mentions how New York had 7,000 active heroes patrolling New York, which is insane to think about because you think most villains would either leave or New York would be the most protected city in the entire world, but you're dead wrong. Pretty much every villain operates in New York, and the heroes who protect it are constantly strained and on the back foot against crime. Now, some have debated against this number as its only example of there being 7,000 heroes and Peter could be exaggerating. But I do think this number is fairly accurate because the entire population of New York City is around 8.5 million people, so a meager 7,000 is less than a whole percent of the entire population. So to me at least, doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility, and it's the only number we have to work with. Plus, a lot of these heroes are probably dealing with some petty or small scale criminal, which is crazy to say that's just a small crime. To compare it to real life, something like a mass shooting or even a terrorist attack are considered so awful that it's a national tragedy and the flag is at half-mast to pay respect to the victims. While in the Marvel universe, I don't think there's been a single week where this flag has not been flown at half-mast. And a crazy gunman is probably getting off light in comparison to your roommate not being able to make rent because the place he worked at was a front for the kingpin. Those are the least of his worries. Now you have to prepare a dinner for 3 because at a certain point Dexter is visiting for dinner because you two might know just a little too much and have to cut off some loose ends. And these are merely the street level predicaments. This isn't talking about the city-wide, nearly apocalyptic events that happen at a semi-regular basis. To give you an idea of what I mean, let me quickly go over some highlights, let's call them. A time where everyone was given spider powers, and small-time criminals have been given all of Spider-Man's powers and are wreaking havoc in the streets. Oh, how could I forget the time where Magneto, who was actually Zorn's twin brother, who was evil, it's fine, I just didn't expect Magneto to be Chinese, went on to destroy New York City, the Statue of Liberty, and create fucking gas chambers for citizens. I forget how unhinged Grant Morrison's X-Men could be. Again, Carnage going on a murder rampage multiple times. Oh, and speaking of symbiotes, you know that one time that the god of symbiotes Null invaded and turned many into symbiote monstrosities? The last thing I'll mention is that during Secret Empire, that really weird storyline I touched on, you want to know what happened to New York City during all of this? It was sent to the Dark Force dimension for several weeks, completely overran by demons. Oh my god. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many events that have happened over the years that have caused just as much, if not more damage. This is so common that there's been an entire team centered on disaster response and repairing superhero-based property damage. It was started by Tony Stark and Wilson Fisk as a way to help the general public when it came to superhero conflicts. Now, this may sound great, but also, damage control is far from squeaky clean. During Civil War, damage control was revealed to be the ones giving Nitro the mutant growth hormone so they could secure a new contract and line the pockets of their higher-ups. If the guys whose job is to help you out during times of superhero disasters can't be entirely trusted, then who can? Tangent aside, do you want to know what's the worst part of it all? Marvel's New York is probably just as expensive, if not more, as the real world. At least with Gotham, it's dirt cheap because, hey, just look at it. But outside of Batman and his family, there aren't really a lot of heroes posted in Gotham, and most of Batman's crime fighting takes place at night. You kinda have to go out of your way to see Batman, or God forbid, you're in an active crime scene. But do you really think for a single second that a Queens landlord wouldn't bump your rent up by a solid hundo if Spider-Man swung past your building on his daily patrols? You get a front row seat to everyone's favorite superhero, so why wouldn't they raise the rent? I mean, if you wanted to go see superheroes actively stopping crime, the only place you can go is New York. Which is exactly why New York is the worst place to live in.